You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. It's Voss here from the ChrisVossShow.com, the ChrisVossShow.com. Welcome to the show, my family and friends. Oh, my God. Thank you. Sit down. Oh, no. The clapping is too much. Just shut that stuff off. Give me a fucking break. Guys, welcome to the big show. The podcast, billionaires, CEOs, entrepreneurs, newsmakers, and the hottest authors come on the show to talk their shop. Now, I'm not talking about Victoria's Secret hot authors. I'm just talking about the hottest new books coming off the shelves. So just so we make that clear, the attorney said I have to disclose that. Anyway, guys, welcome to the Chris Voss Show family. Family that loves you but doesn't judge you. Just remember, don't ask me for money. It's not that kind of family, people. We just love you to listen to the show, and and you're part of a big thing there. So there's that. As always with a family, though, you need to tell all the relatives to show up for the family reunion. And this is what the podcast is. It's a giant family reunion. The stuff I make up from just right off the top of my head. It just amazes me from time to time. I had to break the fourth wall there. So we need you to share that with your family, friends, and relatives. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss, youtube.com/Chris Voss, and Chris Voss 1 on TikTok. And if you don't share the show and refer it to your friends or relatives, do it or else. I don't know what the hell. I'm just kidding, people. We're not going to. The lawyer says I can't threaten people anymore, and so does the judge. I'll get the ankle bracelet off next week. We had an amazing gentleman on the show. We're going to be talking about his new book that he had put out in December 20th, 22, and some of the work he does. I think you're going to like it. He does what he calls geek-centered therapy and psychotherapy up in Washington State, and he's going to maybe help some people with their geeky brain damage. He's gonna teach you how to surgically remove the pocket protector, evidently, and other elements of geek culture. So he's joining us today. His newest book, Not Fishy Enough, a ridiculous parable about finding worth through self-acceptance. Briton Kolber joins us on the show today. He'll be talking about that book and all of his other fun stuff, as we mentioned before. He is a family therapist focusing on geeks as a special population. He has taught applied improvisation at Saga School, General Assembly, and aspiring youth writer. He has done many odd things, ranging from research scientist associate at Applied Research Laboratories to board member of Washington Association for Marriage and Family Therapy, to computer sales, to performing regularly with Comedy Sports Austin, to working in the film industry in Los Angeles. He's still working on commas. He spent his youth split between mountains, or whoever wrote this. Look, the second paragraph, they do commas. He spent his youth split between mountains, culture, and extended family in Austria and a ranch, livestock, space technology, and energy culture in Houston. In what little free time he has left after the grand adventures of his family, he runs, skis, writes sketch comedy, and has conversations with his cats. And tries not to set himself on fire while cooking. Again, wow. Now we have a show. Briton, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, I'm great. Hey, thanks for having me on.
There you go. Please don't let me forget to ask what that final cooking on fire story was. But in the meantime, get us to your .com so people can find you on the interwebs.
Hey, I've got two .coms, BritonKolber.com, because that's hard to spell. It's BritonKolber.com, or even better, notfishyenough.com.
There you go. And we need to get something else later in the show. Don't let me forget about this. But the title of your biography is Behold the Family Knows. So give us an idea of why you wrote this book, Not Fishy Enough.
Well, I wrote this book to solve a problem. So I was realizing that after many years of being a psychotherapist and helping people through things, it turns out I was kind of following the roads with people like, this is the thing happened in my childhood, and this was my ex, and blah, blah, blah.
My mom doesn't love me.
All that. And then it keeps coming down very frequently to like this thing where it's like, well, I just don't believe I'm worth anything, or variations of that. Sometimes it's shame, or just like, I just don't believe I'm really that good. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like this problem kept coming up. And I was like, well, what if I could do kind of an almost time travel kind of thing? What if I could just prevent this sort of thing from happening? At least for like the younger set. Mm-hmm. How do I prevent this kind of like, I'm not good enough, so that I can, kind of work myself out of a job, but also like cut down on a lot of suffering.
There you go. So do you find that a lot of those elements, just to clarify what you said, a lot of those elements of my mom doesn't love me, my dad didn't hug me enough, tell me he was proud of me, my grandmother told me I was ugly, that sort of thing, it all boils down to that.
I'm sorry about that, by the way. Yeah.
Huh?
I'm sorry about that, by the way, with your grandmother.
I had a really toxic family. And it all boils down to that one thing about how you're unlovable and not worthy enough. Yeah. Not you personally, but
right. Well, I did believe that. Despite attempts to like, you're great and whatever, it kind of snuck in. That's the kind of thing that happens when you fail preschool 3 times. You're like, wait, what's wrong with this?
You failed preschool 3 times?
I did. It was an odd school, but they were like, something's up with this kid.
That's like a callback joke we do on the show, only we use 2nd grade. We use preschool a couple times, but we usually say I flunked 2nd grade. Yeah. We did some testing on it, actually. But you actually did flunk.
I seriously did. They were like, wow. They would ask me like questions like, all right. Does a boat have wheels? And I'm like, okay.
Good.
Trick question. Yes. And they're like, oh, God. They're thinking like, oh, no. Cars have wheels. Trucks have wheels. But like boats, well, steering wheels and pulleys on things. They weren't expecting that from a preschool.
As a kid, I had like, I think I saw some boats that had wheels. You could pull it across the thing. But if you think from a realm of possibility where you're like, you're an idea man, you're like, they could.
Yeah. So that's what was going through my head. I vividly remember being asked that question.
There you go.
Like working it through.
There you go. Well, fuck those people. So you flunk it 3 times, and okay. So let's go. We'll do a hero's journey here in a bit, but give us a 30,000 overview of what's inside the book. Evidently, there's a bit of a parable in here.
Yeah. The parable is let's see. The 30,000 view of me is like I tried to solve this problem that I mentioned before. How do I kind of prevent this self-acceptance thing from like going dark? Mm-hmm. And it was like, okay, a great way to do this is if I make it simple, but not like oversimplified, like Joseph. So Richard Feynman is like, if you can't explain something in simple terms, you don't understand it. So I kind of build from that and make it into a story. So it's memorable. And so this little guy goes on a journey in a way that's like, it kind of gives you things you can use. But in a way that isn't an insult to kids, but is actually interesting enough for adults to kind of grab onto something and be like, okay, this comedy works on multiple layers. I've had people in their 50s be like, what are you talking about? Me? Like, this is exactly me. And my kids, and like his 5th grade class at the time were like mobbed me lightly because they were like, I love this book. So it's for a broad audience. Anyway, so simple, not cheesy. And I was inspired by things like Spencer Johnson, the guy who wrote Who Moved My Cheese. It's a classic, sort of a parable classic at this point, parable to get people to think about change. And like, that sounds cool. How do I do something like that? And then, I started iterating on it, like writing about it. And like a couple of years into it, like, okay, I think this is ready. I kind of workshopped it with a lot of folks, and people keep responding to it. So it's been really amazing.
There you go. In I believe there's illustrations in here, and it's kind of part of the parable is a story of crabs and fish.
Yeah.
And
so the other high level thing is it's kind of like it's about a crab that grows up in an isolated tide pool and adopted by fish. And so there's no other crabs around, and fish is his example. He just grows up thinking he's like a really incompetent fish. Like he can't, right? He's got to eat with his fins. He can't swim properly. He feels like an idiot.
What an idiot.
Yeah.
I mean, well, I'm judging.
Well, feels like
I'm sorry. Yeah. My bad. I'm not
but see, it happens. It happens.
Not helping the healing here.
Yeah.
So, is this targeted to, because it's illustrated and, it talks about crabs and fish and some fun sort of characters, is it targeted to a certain audience of age or just fun for everybody?
Well, if you try to categorize this on Amazon or the bookstore, they kind of cross their eyes a bit because I'm like, yes, because it's clearly for kids and it's clearly for adults. But the best cross-section is for kids and the adults who care for them, because it's, especially with the questions at the end, it's about sparking a conversation. How do you talk about worth? How do you talk about critical thinking? How do you talk about like fitting in? How do you talk about gender in a way that feels like it's safe enough to talk about?
There you go. Yeah. And parables are a great way to learn. I mean, you learn from stories because, sometimes just someone telling you, hey, you're an idiot, you should fix yourself, is a little hard to learn from. So
it turns out,
Yeah, that's what people have been telling me for 55 years, and look how that turned out. Parables going through learning self-acceptance. I really never thought about it, but a lot of different issues of what people have. I mean, I suppose childhood traumas and abuse and different things can fall into that same category of learning to finding your self-worth and accepting yourself, because so many people have treated you worthlessly, I suppose. All right. Thanks, Mom.
Well, one of the things I think that is awesome about self-worth and like self-acceptance, thanks, Mom, is Mom. Okay, good. Is like if you actually like yourself, which is a hard concept for people. What? I know. If you like yourself, you don't care that much about what other people think.
Yeah, that's true. Screw those people.
Right. It's kind of like
whatever. I still don't like myself, but I still say screw those people.
Okay. Well, that's different. We can talk about that after the show.
That's a different malady. That's a different psychosis. Yeah. Gotta love narcissism. So there you go. So you wrote the book, and it's designed to help people, and I guess you use it in your practice. One thing that's interesting about your practice is we aforementioned geek-centered therapy. Yeah. So you work mostly with people who are geeks?
Yeah.
All right. So do you turn away people who are not geeks? Like you're just like, I'm sorry, you're not geek enough.
No, not yet. Right. I mean, the thing is, everybody's got, geeky is kind of like a culture thing. It's kind of like if you're into things, you don't care what other people think. Mm-hmm. It's not all like Star Trek and Magic the Gathering. It's just D&D, like and D&D. It's people like getting into something. They don't necessarily care about what other people think. They're just excited about entomology or whatever the heck there is.
There you go. Yeah. So you work with the socially awkward. This is per your website, so I don't want people to think I'm throwing shade at people who wear pocket protectors all the time. He's done great work with the socially awkward, the obsessed, the passionate, con attenders, referring to like Comic-Con, the cosplays, the D&D players, the sci-fi enthusiasts, the philosophers, the engineers, the scientists, the coders, developers. You ever work with furries? They're pretty geeky too.
Not yet.
There's still time.
That's the edge. I wouldn't be surprised if like 2052, there's like, the first openly furry public official or something.
There you go. Well, you are in Washington, so I think you'd have to open in Portland, Oregon to experience some of that. So there's still time. There's still time. I'd like to. There's a whole. I'm sure there's a whole psychological 10 to 20 year business there of solving whatever's going on with furry things.
Yeah.
And yes, I am judging. You also talk about trauma and the chaos of ADHD.
Yeah.
You have advanced training in those. So what are some of the ways that you help people? And I guess you only practice in Washington, so people would have to deal with you up there. But what are some of the things you find people that are of the geek nature? Maybe this should be a gender because there's already 500 of them. What do you find people of the geek nature suffer from the most, or or majority of the time trying to overcome, other than just being geeks?
Well, I mean, honestly, a lot of it is about self-acceptance. Mm-hmm. Like, it really does, like, segue right into the book, because they didn't necessarily choose to be into whatever they are. It just kind of happened to them, so, it could be like people that just really like data science, they just, and the people that, like to code, they like to do cosplay, they just have trouble thinking like it's okay to be who they are. They get up frequently bullied or at least socially ostracized. They go to college, they kind of find their people often. They're like, oh, great. Okay, at least there's some more people like me. I feel like less of a freak now. Yeah. But also imposter syndrome, depression, anxiety, like they all kind of go together.
Yeah, because sometimes they're people that sometimes just they have a different angle in life. Like they can think in numbers, and they can think in math, and they can think in, but sometimes they're socially awkward, as you put on your website, and part of it is because they think in that different way, but. They certainly have, when I grew up watching, what was it, Nerds? What was that nerd movie that was so popular?
Oh, Revenge of the Nerds.
Revenge of the Nerds. You're always picking on nerds and stuff. But they sure took over the world, man. Now, like there's, like we talked about in the pre-show, there's Elon Musk and, there's that Bill Gates guy. And, I mean, that guy still is nerdy as shit. And he's got like billions of dollars. And you can't even fix that.
No. Well, he could just give it away. He could solve that problem pretty quick.
Oh, yeah, that problem. But the nerds thing,
the nerds thing, no. It's hard. It's like, it's like asking someone to just not be who they are. Yeah. You can fake it for a little while and kind of blend in. Yeah. But ultimately, it's like, well, I'm into this. I like this. I don't know.
It's a big world, and everyone's different. And that's the beauty of how our world works, is you can have, there's different people, and different people make up the world and contribute to the greatness of this world, because there's nobody's got the thumb on the scale. And, maybe these guys can't run the marathon, or, well, they can run marathons, but maybe they can't be Tom Brady and whatever, but, they don't have that caveman muscle type sort of thing, but they got the brains. They got their brains, which is neither of I have.
Well, I mean, quick, it reminds me of like the original definition of survival of the fittest, Darwin, was not about like fitness in like being big and strong. It was like, do you fit in your environment? So if our environment favors like being smart and kicking butt that way, well, that's the fittest. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, we definitely moved from a world where brawn was everything to where now brains are everything, which has left me behind on both scales. So there you go. There was some tease out in your bios that we wanted to come back to. One was the nose thing. Behold the family nose. What's up there?
Well, it was another little like self-acceptance thing, because it was part of my little journey. Like I grew up being, there's a guy who made fun of me. We since kind of made up for it, but he called me needle nose, bugged the crap out of me. I mean, it was even pointier when I was a kid. It was even pointier than it is now. And I was pretty self-conscious about it. My mom was even like, hey, let's get you some plastic surgery,
What's with your mom, eh?
Fix that out. Well, she wanted me to have a good future. But I went to, in Austria, I went to my uncle's pastry shop, and he wasn't there. I was asking for him. And as my uncle there. And they were like, well, who's this kid? But they looked at me for a second and they're like, oh, he's got the Kolber nose. And I was like, oh my God, I feel seen. You know, like, this is not just like something weird. This is family. This means I belong somewhere. And that just stuck with me for years since that. I was like, okay, this is the family knows.
Now I know why you went into therapy. There you go. Anytime I meet someone in psychiatry, I'm like, what happened to you as a child?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. People go into therapy. This is my theory. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But my theory is a lot of people go into psychiatry because it's cheaper to go in and learn the business to fix all their childhood problems than it is to pay somebody to do it.
Oh, I think you're not wrong. I mean, if you go to psychiatry, there's like a huge medical debt. I mean, med school is not cheap, but like the trajectory, I think you're pretty much there.
You guys have the highest suicide rate of any career path, and yet you guys are the ones who are supposed to solve the suicide issues.
Oh, we're gonna check those numbers. I'm gonna check that out. I'm not sure about that.
See that it's right behind dentist, one of the two.
Okay. I thought it was veterinarian. Veterinarian's pretty rough.
Is it veterinarians? Well,
I don't know. Well, we look at some charts.
Put in the top 5 or something. Anyway, there you go. That or just they have a high suicide rate because they're like, listen to people bitch about their lives all the time. I mean, that would drive me over the edge.
Oh, well, that's a big deal. You got to learn how to take care of yourself. So you don't sink into the pit of despair.
Yeah, you got some beauty queen talking about how hard life is, you know, that guys are always throwing money at her, and you're like, serious? This is a complaint? I don't know what people complain about in the thing. Right. So tell us this story about how you cook and fire, and it doesn't sound like the proper fire you're supposed to use when cooking.
Right. Well, now I have better fire safe procedures. But there was this time where I was boiling some potatoes over a gas stove, and I leaned over to check on them, and boom! I was like, "Dang it! I like that shirt."
Your shirt fell into the fire. Oh.
Yeah.
This must have been a great episode.
It's good reason to tuck your shirt in.
You didn't end up with 3rd-degree burns or anything, right?
No.
Okay, so
I got caught it quickly.
It's not too scarring.
You didn't have to stop, dropping.
We're not going to trigger too many people at home with the thing.
Not so much.
So now your main prerogative when you're cooking is not just to cook the food, but not to cook yourself.
This is true.
Is that how that works?
Yeah.
See what I did there?
It has served me well.
So there you go. I really think you should expand a furry sort of. Has anybody targeted the market for psychology help on furry people?
Oh,
maybe
sure
maybe they don't want to help. Maybe
well, I mean, it's probably going to be something that's normalized. Like this is how people are, and this is what they're into.
The funny part about furries is they're having sex in those outfits.
Yeah, I saw that CSI episode about that.
Yeah, and they're like, I saw like something on a convention. It was like they were doing some documentary about a convention on them, and not this is in my Pornhub, but they're having sex in the outfits. Like it's one. I was watching a convention. I'm like, they're walking around those outfits all day. That's got to get hot in there, right? Like I've got we used to do a thing with the rubber horse head when I go to conventions and events like CES, so we take pictures of all of us casually sitting around and just one of us having a horse head and just like it looks like we're having, we're in a bar having, conversations and stuff. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, it's a horse in a bar having conversation. Who knew? Funny shit like that. And so we do it as a gag, but I mean, you can only wear that thing for like about 2 minutes before your head explode with fire and heat. And I'm like, how are people walking around wearing that? And then I understood those guys, were doing the wild thing in the suits. And I'm like, how do you not catch on fire and like explode from internal combustion of heat? But I mean, you might be in a
if you're making your own outfit, you're probably thinking of ventilation in there somewhere.
Yeah, maybe there's a ventilation system to it. Maybe I should look into this more. Maybe I don't want to look in this more.
I think.
And clearly, if you're having sex in it, there are some holes in it. So there you go.
Yeah,
I don't know what that means.
Okay, let me stop right there. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, you can find that on Twitter, folks. So what have we talked about with your book and your work that we want to tease out to people and get them to contact you and work with you?
I think one of the biggest things is the sort of changing your story. Like Edwin comes in believing that he's just an incompetent fish. And then as the story goes on, he's like, well, maybe there's something else. Maybe there's a different meaning I can make out of my life. Right. And when I think about like the different meaning I can make out of my life, I start thinking about constellations. So when you look at stars in the sky, I mean, if you're in the city, you're not going to see that many, but think about stars, they're just data points, and it could be a little dipper, a little water thing. It could be a little bear. But if you go back far enough, Babylonian times was a wagon. In China, it's a purple house. So the same things can have different stories. And so I want you to look at your own life events, not be delusional, not just edit stuff out, but just look at the things that happened and be like, how can I make a different meaning out of it? How can I make a different story out of it? And that's kind of what Edwin does. And he's encouraged along the way to go like, what if you're something else? What if you're actually cool just the way you are? You're just not what you think you are.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
That does make sense. And maybe what you think is cool that you're not, or people told you weren't when you were growing up, is you're really just cool, and it's fine. It's everybody has a different flavor of cool, or a different being, and everyone contributes usually.
Yeah. Even if you're into being a furry.
Yeah, even if that's the callback. So there you go. It's interesting to me. You give me a new concept and epiphany on. We talk a lot on the show about traumas and the traumas that this show gives to people. And for listening,
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, well, that's why people keep coming back. They're addicted.
I think the trauma comes from the intro, like they're expecting like monster trucks.
Yeah. It's I think I had a presidential advisor one day. He goes, hey, I thought I was in a monster truck show or WWE. Like, what's going on?
I personally keep expecting like some kind of like 2 Chris Vosses enter, 1 leaves. There's that other Chris Voss, the FBI negotiator. You guys on the same show.
We were talking about doing death cage matches. And having like authors come on the show to do that, and they fight each other to the death or something. Maybe there should be I think that's pretty much every episode we've ever had is the fight to the death of any brain cells left. I don't know, whatever. There's a joke there somewhere. I'm not going to unravel it. But there you go. And this. So you give me this idea that it's about self-acceptance. So do you just beat people over the head when they go, my mom didn't hug me enough as a child? Just like, shut up and just accept yourself, dummy.
It works every time.
Basically.
No, it's got to be like an invitation. I mean, like the first mentor I ever had in psychology was this guy, I believe he was from Nicaragua, and he used this joke like several times. And he says, how many light bulbs, how many psychiatrists does it take to change a light bulb? I'm like, I don't know, just one, but it has to want to change. Right. So it's all motivation, The
light bulb has to want to change.
Right. So you got to follow the motivation. So if someone wants to beat up on themselves, you got to find out why they want to do that. Most people beat up on themselves and don't like themselves because they think that's the only way to succeed. They think if they accept themselves the way they are, well, then that's it. That's it. They have to stay 200 pounds overweight. They have to stay underachieving. But
and is it social standards that make them feel that way? They're like, well, I'm not Tom Brady, the caveman, muscle type dude. Yeah. So therefore, I'm an underachiever if I'm not that, because that's what society tells me.
Yeah, I mean, it basically starts. I mean, one of the reasons I picked like this age group for the book is like that seems to be where the comparison starts setting in. Like around between 8 and 12, something just kind of turns on, and kids are like, oh, I'm just going to stop making art because I'm not very good at it. Or maybe I'm just not the best football player in the world. And because they start comparing, they can go one of 2 directions. They can go towards critical thinking, like, all right, what do I need to do to get my art to look better? Or how do I up my game? Or they can go to another direction, which is self-judgment. It's like, well, I just suck and I should just stop trying. Right? And so that's what I want to get people to stop judging and start going towards, great, you want a goal. I mean, you want to change something. Let's find a goal. What can you do?
There you go.
Right?
And so the questions you have in the book are designed for classrooms, mental health professionals, for caregivers in general. And of course, it's set in an aquatic fish sort of scenario. I like it. It helps people kind of identify that, hey, everyone's got a place in this world. It's a big world. It's multifaceted. Everyone's got something to contribute. It is tough when you're growing up, especially in high school, because, it seems like there's the jocks and there's the cheerleaders and then there's the nerds, and, it's kind of segmented into these different cliques and stuff. But, nowadays, nerds were the world, and I don't know, all the guys who were jocks in high school are, I don't know, they're working security jobs now or something. I don't really know. I'm just making that up, people.
Right.
People from my high school.
But a lot of the guys, they do tend to kind of peak. That was their time.
Yeah. There's a joke there somewhere about that, but
Sure.
I'm not going.
Where did you fit in on this, by the way? I gotta know. Like, I'm getting like you were not the jock, but geek's not your thing. Where did you fit in?
I was probably geeky, but
Yeah.
I was also probably a narcissistic asshole, so I didn't really care. I was probably, I don't know, somewhere in between, because I had friends who were geeks, really geeky, and I really didn't like them. I mean, I liked them, but I would probably pick on them a little bit.
Yeah.
I was kind of like mid jock, mid geek. I was probably somewhere in the middle, which is probably hasn't changed actually, because I still tease some of my geek friends. But I'm probably geeky when it comes down to it. I'm just in denial. I'm one of those self-loathing people. Like you ever meet someone who's something and they hate on other people or like them, and you're like, but what? That makes no sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing I figured out, if it's not going too deep, is like if you do self-loathing, it's kind of like you beat other people to the punch. Oh yeah, you can't make fun of me because I hate me more.
Yeah. We call it self-effacing in comedy, but it's really self-loathing when it comes down to it, if you know most comedians. There you go. And you do a little bit of that. You do comedic improv work. Which is why we've been having fun on the show. Tell us what you like about that, and does it help you with not only your own therapy but other people's therapy?
Well, yeah, comedy is pretty amazing. I mean, comedy is both like almost like forbidden. I know a lot of people who say their therapists have no sense of humor, which is a problem. But you don't want to have your therapist be all like glib and like cracking jokes all the time.
My therapist laughs at everything I say. I mean, he'll roll around. I'll be like, my mom doesn't love me and my dad didn't hug me enough as a child, and he just rolls on the ground. And he's like, and then I'm like, what's that about? And he's like, well, I see their point.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that's about,
Nice.
but I don't know why I'm paying $120 an hour for this abuse.
Well, one of the coolest things about comedy came out from reading a book called Truth in Comedy. Truth in Comedy is about like finding out like the things that are the funniest are actually the things that are true. Like it's not just stuff that's clever. It's stuff that's like, oh, that hurts. Like, that's a little too true. And so, but what's also cool about comedy, not only do you find what's true, according to like Stephen Porges and polyvagal theory, you actually can help people feel a sense of safety. And if you can help someone feel safe and like even laugh at themselves a little bit, like it's okay, you're already starting to think more clearly. You're not scared of what the other person is going to say. You're just like, okay, we're cool. We're hanging out now.
There you go. That's why we call this infotainment, what we do here on the Chris Voss Show podcast.
Nice.
We have brilliant people on like yourself and really high-minded stuff, and it can get dry if we don't if we don't throw some comedy in there, and people learn so much better with comedy. And like you say, comedy is a great deliverer of truth, because holding a mirror up to people and going, you're really fucked up, either as a human race or as a people, or what we do, or just in an individual. Holding a mirror and saying that to people is it's not a big rapport builder last time I checked, and people turn it off to it. Which is what my mom did to me growing up. Right. But
I'm so sorry.
No, don't be. It was a character builder.
Good.
There you go.
I had a really cool conversation. I had this privilege of speaking with John Cleese of Monty Python.
Oh, there you go.
And it was really cool. We talked about comedy and psychology. And one of the things that was cool about that is we came to this agreement. So I was thinking comedy, you can either use it to avoid pain, like kind of laugh it off, keep it at a distance, or you can use it as kind of like a Band-Aid to help you get through it. And he added to it. He said, I think it's actually, well, in his way, I think it's actually about, it can actually be the way through the pain.
There you go.
Like it is the transformational thing. Like if you can laugh your ass off while you're in pain, you can be like, actually, maybe it's not so bad.
There you go. And it gives you some levity and perspective, I think, too. Yeah. Where, it's interesting about whenever we go through something cathartic or some sort of challenging time, there's always those people who always tell you, you're going to laugh about this someday. And then you punch them in the face. And then you tell them, you're going to laugh about this someday, too, probably. So how's that, fucker?
How does that work?
How's that? Yeah. Enjoy that. Line. And so, but then we usually end up later we can look at things and maybe smile on them and they're not so dreary and dark and we can go, hey, I got through that. And comedy, like you say, helps us get through that. I love comedy because like you say, you can address different things, social issues, what people do, and you can say, hey, we do some really stupid shit as human beings.
Yes.
But you don't have to say it in that way. And you can present it in a way where we can look through the mirror and laugh, but inside we're going, there's some truth to that. Yeah. We're not the smartest little beings we think we are. Maybe we should do better.
Yeah. And, it's a great way to get change to happen. I mean, that was like the whole role of the trickster in mythology and folklore, like the coyote in Native American groups, the court jester in medieval, courts. He was the guy who could make fun of the king. So like could say the uncomfortable truth, and as a psychotherapist, I think it's important to be able to say, hey, by the way, there's this elephant in the room. We should talk about that.
We should talk about your elephant.
We should talk about this elephant in the room, and if you can make it feel safe while doing it, it's like, okay, fine. You're right.
My therapist laughs at the elephant in the room. It's like, holy shit, that's an ugly ass elephant. Where'd you get it? From my mom. I don't know why. Use my mom as a callback joke. I'm sorry, Mom. I love my mom. She's nice. We're just having fun. The elephant in the room. People need to learn, and it's so. Do people need to sit down and go basically do that? Who's that guy Smiley or whatever it was on Saturday Night Live, where you look in the mirror? It was Al Franken, and you go, I like myself. Yeah, I like myself. I'm a good person. Do people just need to do more of that? Is basically that it?
Oh, honestly, that's a great question, because I wondered that for years, and it turns out like Kristen Neff, NEFF, has done this amazing research on this, and she just basically borrowed heavily from Buddhism, where it's about being kind to yourself. Like, what if I like myself? What if I'm open to the idea of someday liking myself? There's this whole tradition of a loving kindness meditation. As cheesy as that sounds, it's a great way to kind of open it up to like, well, what if I actually am okay with me?
There you go. I mean, everyone should be okay with themselves. I mean, screw other people, what other people think.
But it's dangerous. It's dangerous because if you're ostracized by your community, it can kind of feel like death.
That's true. Yeah, that can feel death. But maybe it's them and not you. I don't know. That's a whole narcissistic outlook on life. But it's one of those things where what was the old thing with Fight Club? I remember watching Fight Club, and we're trying to get the author on the show. He's got a new book out, and so watch for that in case we do, because I'd love to get him. But I remember watching Fight Club, and the guy said, I think it was a Brad Pitt line. He said, we buy stuff to impress people who don't give a shit about us.
Yeah.
And that really struck me, because I was buying all sorts of stuff to impress people and impress myself. I grew up poor, so some of it was for me. But it really struck me, and I'm like, God, people don't give a shit. Like, I've met people that are like, they spend a lot of time worried about what people think about them socially. And about 40, it seems like when you're about 40, you finally realize that, hey man, everyone's not thinking about you. Like, they're busy. They're just like you. They're thinking about them. they're not really worried about what Chris Voss is doing 24/7, unless they're my stalkers.
Mhm.
But other than that, those are the people who make me feel loved because they need me. But all 5 of them. But yeah. So,
But seriously,
yeah.
it's like we seem to be kind of wired for this. Like, it's the amygdala is a sort of like little tiny thing in the mammal part of your brain, but the emotional center, and it's looking for threats. It's looking for like that's just it's better to mistake a stick for a snake and like freak out than die. We're selected for that, and so it's like physical threats, but also emotional threats. Because if we're ostracized, if we're out of the group, we don't get to eat. We only get to forage wherever we can, and they can just keep us out. And so that sense of like threat from being like kicked out is just there. We didn't ask for that to be installed. And so we've got to know that threat's there, and then trying to like keep that in mind. What do I do to not get kicked out, but also kind of like who yourself at the same time? So it's like a constant balance. How do we keep liking yourself, belonging to who you are, but also kind of fitting in, but not so much that you lose track of who you are?
See, I just like myself a lot, and then I try to do everything I can to get kicked out of the tribe. But for some reason, they think it's entertaining, so they keep me. So I don't know. I just don't give a fuck anymore. It's there's some dark triad stuff going on there. I see that there's like a Rorschach test behind you or something.
Oh yeah,
beside your book. What's that about? I'm curious.
Oh, it's just this way. There you go. First. Yeah, it's just a little homage to like the traditions of psychotherapy. Every now and then I use one, but it's just just kind of fills in the blank. Like, well, what do you think it is?
There you go. Is it weird that every Rorschach test to me looks like a female body part? Or is that something seriously wrong with me?
I don't think it's something serious. I think it tells me that, like your social life needs to change a little bit.
Do I need a frontal lobotomy? Is that a shock?
No, you need a bottle in front of me. Very much more Willie Nelson.
Well, we did about 20 years of that. So
nice. Okay.
Not going back to that. So
okay.
There you go. Any final thoughts you want to tease out, Briton, before we go on? Briton.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I think there's a lot of stuff that people can, learn from this book, but something that's not fully detailed in there that I think is a great thing to run, to take from this is a lot of like what we do comes down to this sort of mammal maintenance. And when I say mammal maintenance, it's like the Homo sapiens part of us, the logic, the deciding. If it was all about that, I wouldn't have much to talk about. We get in trouble because of all this mammal stuff. We don't feel safe enough. There's all this stuff happening behind the scenes about what we're afraid of, what our first relationships were, what our beliefs are, how we make meaning out of the world, and how we feel about it. And what we've really got to do, what I do most of the time, is just deal with all this mammal stuff. How can they take care of like this thing? It's almost like it's a wildly ill-trained dog, and you got to like soothe this. Especially in couples, they're like, wow, okay, let's see if we can do less blaming and more like seeing each other. But again, when you see, they feel safe, the mammal's like, cool, and then Homo sapien back online.
There you go. A lot of mammal stuff, eh?
A lot of mammal stuff.
Maybe I should start using that in my arguments with other people. Quit being a mammal, eh? So maybe they
evolve. Yeah.
Evolve. Sounds like most politicians and political conversation I have on Facebook. So there you go.
Sure.
All right. Well, this has been very insightful, cool. Briton, and very exciting. And I'm glad there's a resource out there for geeks everywhere. Everyone has a place in life. One thing I remember when I was a kid looking at the Sears catalog, and it kind of came to me that life is like the Sears catalog. You can choose the life you want to have. Just like you can look in the book and be like, hey, I want to choose this life. I want to do that life. And yeah, maybe your personality might be more geeky, or you might be better at math and other people are better at social skills. But a lot of things you can really develop. Like I was a really closed off introvert when I was young. and I was a people watcher, and I learned a lot from that. But then the judge says I can't do that at the park bench anymore. I don't know what that means. But I slowly learned, starting companies, that I had to open my mouth and be a leader and communicate and be an extrovert. And now people can get me to shut the fuck up. Yeah. So, which is what the judge also talks to me about. Yeah. And I'll get the ankle bracelet off next week.
That's good.
As long as they meet my parole conditions.
Something to look forward to.
But, people can change and grow. So I think it's important people realize that everyone's got something to contribute. And maybe the conversation needs to be like what you've talked about, gaining self-acceptance of yourself, knowing your self-worth, and, asking yourself, hey, what can I contribute to this world? And how can I make a difference? And there's so many different levels of where people share stories. I mean, there's so many people we've had on the show that share their stories, share what they learned, written great books about it. And stories are kind of like the owners. I know this is redundant. My audience is like, he's not going to say it again. But stories are the great owner's manual to life. We don't get an owner's manual. So sharing stories and helping each other, and then, of course, realizing we're not alone, is a great owner's manual to life. And usually when you help yourself in that way, you help other people, too, because other people go, hey, I'm a furry and I need help, too. So there you go.
Precisely.
We need to have more furries on this show just so I can figure out what the hell's going on with that whole furry thing.
It's a good job.
And we can figure out how that whole heat element thing gets worked out, because that's what I'm curious about it. So there you go. These are things that I lay awake at night and wonder about. Like, how do they not internally combust wearing that for a whole, conference show? Yeah. So if you figure it out, please let me know so I can get some sleep. God damn it. Thank you very much, Briton, for coming on the show. Give us your .com so people can find you on the interwebs, please.
Yeah, you bet. Notfishyenough.com and BritonKolber.com.
There you go. There you go. And all that good stuff. So thank you very much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it, man.
Thanks for having me. It's great.
There you go. Order up the book where refined books are sold. Remember, stay away from those fishy alleyway bookstores. The book is entitled Not Fishy Enough, a ridiculous parable about finding worth through self-acceptance, out December 20th, 2022. There's a lot of twos in there. So December 2022. There you go. Briton Kolber. Look for it wherever their books are sold. Thanks so much for tuning in. We certainly appreciate you guys. As always, as a family, remember, the Chris Voss Show is a giant family reunion where the family gets together and I don't know, we throw food at each other. Something, or we listen to just great people that come on the show. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss, youtube.com/Chris Voss, and Chris Voss 1 at TikTok. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other and self-accept yourself already. Damn it. We'll see you next time.